Hi everyone, it's Laura here and welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's video I'm going to show you how to create a floral watercolor card using stamps and dies by Altenew. The images I will be using today come from the Wallpaper art stamp set. This one is new with the March 2019 release and it's full of beautiful and bold images of florals and leaves as well as sentiments. The stamp set comes with coordinating dies that will cut the outline of your images. And another fun product that coordinates with these images is the mask stencil. Altenew has been coming out with these great stencils which have a double feature. So on the one hand, as you can see, you get the traditional stencil that you can use for your inking techniques. But you also get the cutouts, so sort of the negative of the stencils, and this can be used for masking. And I have another card on my blog where I have used this stencil for a one-layer card, so make sure to check that out. Also because this card is part of a blog hop with giveaways, so you don't want to miss that. And the blog post will be linked in the description box down below. Coming to today's card, I started by stamping several images from the set, so pretty much every single image in this set, on some Canson XL watercolor cardstock using some waterproof ink. I will be painting these images with Gansai Tambi watercolors and die cutting them with the coordinating dies to create my floral arrangement. I am stamping using my mini MISTI so that I am sure to get a nice and crisp impression even on the textured watercolor cardstock. And then once I have stamped all my images, I can go ahead and start painting them. As I mentioned, I will be using my Gansai Tambi watercolors and I am using the wet on wet technique. So I'm starting by laying a layer of clean water in the area that I want to paint. And once that area is entirely covered with water, I'm going to pick up a little bit of paint and drop it in the areas that I think will be the darkest. In this case, this would be the base of the petals. And then once I have dropped my color, I'm going to move on and paint a different area because I am basically leaving all the work to the water that's there on my paper, and that will take care of blending out my paints. You don't want to be painting two adjacent areas one right after the other because the water that's present in one will cause some bleeding from the paint that you're adding in the other. So that's something you have to be careful about. And what I love about watercoloring is that because this is something you don't want to be rushing through, you are almost forced to take it slowly, and so the whole process is really relaxing. For the flowers, I started by adding a first layer with the color number 32 in the set of 36 pans of Gansai Tambi watercolors. And once this first layer was dry, I added a second one. And for that I used the other red that you see in my palette. And I obtained that one by mixing the pan number 32 with one of the purples in the Gansai Tambi set, which is number 38. I will not show you the painting for all the flowers for today's card, but the techniques are the same, so I'm always using this wet on wet technique. I will come back later on to explain other parts of the painting process, but for now I will leave you with some nice music to enjoy the rest of the painting for the flowers. Once I was done painting the flowers, I decided that I wanted to add a little bit more definition and depth to the petals. So what I did is I mixed a bit of a darker red using again pans number 32 and pans number 38, this time with a little bit more purple in it. And then I used a number 4 brush to create some flicks in order to add some texture and some detail to the petals. You want to make sure that your petals are completely dry before you do this, otherwise the lines you get will not be crisp, but will start blending in with the rest of the paint that you have on your petals. And I went ahead and did this for all the petals in both flowers that you see here. For the center of the flowers, I used colors number 44 and 46, and I'm adding color and shading using some dotting motions with my paintbrush. I painted the other flower off camera and then I moved on and started working on my leaves. Because I knew that the leaves were going to be mostly hidden behind the flowers and that the flowers were going to be the real star of the show, I could get away with a bit of a faster painting for the leaves. Again, I am going to use 2 layers of color and the wet on wet technique. For the first layer, I used pan number 54. And then for the second one, I mixed it with the yellow that I have on my palette to create a bit of a brighter shade of green to add to my leaves. And I am creating dimension on my leaves by having the areas at the center and at the base of each leaf the darkest. Once I was done with the painting, I made sure that everything was really dry. I used my heat gun to speed up the drying process so that I didn't have to wait too long. And then, in the exact same way as I did for my flowers, I added texture and detail to the leaves using a darker green and a fine tip paintbrush. Once I was done painting and I was sure that everything was completely dry, I used the coordinating dies to the Altenew Wallpaper art stamp set to die cut all my images, and here you can see them, absolutely gorgeous. Because these images are rather large and the design is so bold and full of detail, I felt I didn't really need to have too much going on my background. So all I did was to cut some Canson XL watercolor cardstock to an A2 size and to add some droplets, first with the reds in my palette, so those same Gansai Tambi watercolors that I used for the florals, and then by adding some Nuvo shimmer sprays in antique gold. And this will add some subtle sparkle that will make the card even more elegant. I played a little bit with the arrangement of my die cuts until I found a composition that I liked, and then I went ahead and glued down everything on my card base using my Nuvo Deluxe adhesive and also making sure to cover up that smudge on the top right corner of my card base, which I didn't feel looked that appealing at all. I am using liquid glue because that gives me a little bit of wiggle room to move things in place and adhere them exactly as I want. And also because this cardstock is pretty thick and I want to make sure that it's secured nicely to my card base. And Nuvo Deluxe adhesive is a nice and strong glue that doesn't take too long to dry. To frame up my design a little bit, I decided to add some hand-drawn stitches. I'm not using a ruler or anything to make sure that my stitched line is completely straight, because I think a bit of irregularity adds to the design of this card. The pen that I used is a Copic multiliner, but any fine tip black pen will work for this purpose. And then the last element for this card is the sentiment. I used the one that reads "Thank you" from the Altenew Wallpaper art stamp set. I embossed it with white embossing powder on some black cardstock, and then I used my guillotine trimmer to cut a thin banner around it. Initially, I thought I would have it sort of come out of one of the leaves and run across the entire card front, but then I decided it would look nicer if it was cut almost as if it was a label. I glued it to my card front, which is mounted on a top folding A2 card base, and that finished off my card. And that's it for today. If you guys enjoyed this video, please let me know in the comments below, give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel. Make sure to visit my blog for more details about the blog hub to celebrate the Altenew release and the giveaways that go with it. And I'll catch you guys soon with the next video. Ciao!